Uh, let's start out with this. I noticed in your bio that you've worked in energy for a couple of Fortune 500 companies. So do you have any opinions about energy in Indiana?
Sure. I had spent a lot of time as a young man actually here in Clay County in the Brazil area. Worked for Amex Coal Company, which is a company no longer exists. And prior to that, I'd worked for Peabody Coal Company. So spent a lot of time in this area back in the 70s and 80s. I am very proud that when I was in the legislature that we passed legislation to promote energy independence, Indiana coal. I'm a big fan of our energy independence and coal. I myself have, as an attorney, have done work in the coal industry still, even though I no longer obviously work for a coal company. I've done work in the coal industry. I've also done work in solar, and have also done work in methane and gas, and a little bit in wind. So I have broadened my energy background, but I think energy independence is real important. I'm a big supporter of coal. I've disagreed with in the past with President Obama's position on coal for a lot of reasons. But number one, I believe in energy independence. Coal is very important to our economy in Southwest Indiana, but it's more than just the coal miner. The coal miner itself is essential, but it's not just them, it's also the people that work at the power plants. Look at all the power plants we've got from the Terre Haute area all the way down to Evansville and all the way over to Madison on the river. But it also impacts us because Indiana is a huge manufacturing state still. We have the largest manufacturing per capita income in the country. And when we shift away from coal like that, which is what the president's saying, rather than kind of piecemeal it along and work and do some things like others are suggesting, what happens then is that also not just affects the coal miner, not just the utility company, but it also affects the consumer. But what does it do to Chrysler in Kokomo, Alcoa down at Newburgh or Lafayette? What does it do to all of the steel industry, whether it's in Crawfordsville or all along Lake Michigan, or Rolls-Royce and Allison in Indianapolis? You know, what's it do to General Motors in Marion? It's just what I would have done had I have been governor. I would have worked with the president, it's not really with the president, but with the EPA. The governor of Kentucky and West Virginia did much the same thing. They sat down and tried to negotiate out a settlement where you kind of phased and worked along and rather than just boom, let that hatchet drop, because it has really big effects on us here in Indiana. I wake up every morning and see that Duke power plant off in the distance, and I can tell you that the difference living in that area now than 45 years, it's unbelievable. I mean, coal is combusted a lot cleaner today than it has been, and it continues to be cleaned a lot better. It's combusted, but it looks like a lot of people are just totally against it. And I think we've got to realize, as we are looking at broadening our energy consumptions, not just with coal, but natural gas, methane, and also wind and solar, we need to realize the impact this has on the power plants, because it's going to cost to convert them over, and on the existing consumers, not just homes, but also industries. Those are the conversations we need to be having, and I don't think either side wants to do it. You know, they just kind of want to point fingers at each other and say they're wrong. You know, every now and then you've got to have some adult leadership that sits down and says, hey, let's talk about this. How can we get everybody together and work towards some goals here?
In 1986, you were elected to the state legislature as a representative, and in 1996 you were made Speaker of the House. And when I think about you as being a fairly conservative Democrat, much in the mold of Evan Byer. Maybe he's in your mold. I'm not sure how you'd want to put that. But anyway, one of the things that he talked about in Washington that we have seen in Indiana is a lot of headbutting.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how things have changed, in your opinion, from the time you left the General Assembly until today.
Well, you know, I left the General Assembly back in 2002. I left voluntarily. Governor O'Bannon was still alive, and I was real proud when I left. The very last 2 years I was there, I won a national award that I shared with the then, he was called the Minority Leader, he's now the Speaker of the House, Brian Bosma. We won a national award because we had worked in a bipartisan fashion, which is what the voters want. Yeah. And I'm very proud that 2 of the 6 years I was Speaker, we were tied 50-50. But I was still Speaker. We took the best ideas from the Democrats and the Republicans. We met in the middle and went forward. Governor Bai was a good example to see do that when he was governor. Governor O'Bannon continued the same vein. I think that's what most Hoosiers want. I'm a very fiscally conservative or responsible Democrat. I believe in a strong economy. I'm a big fan of small businesses. That's why we put out this 35-point economic development program. It focuses on existing small businesses, but also attracting new businesses. It allows for venture capital. It allows for credits. It allows us to focus our state's activities in 5 high-growth, high-wage areas. And I think this is where you get the best of Democrats and Republicans. I'm not going to argue our employment rate is low, but what I'm going to argue is we've now slid from 34th to 39th in per capita income in just the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. A Hoosier family of 4 sitting down for supper tonight brings home $7,800 in the course of a year less than the national average. That's not good. We've got areas that I want to focus on as governor on jobs in agriculture, because agribusiness is going through a phenomenal change. 21st century logistics, information technology, life sciences, and then in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing as it's called. We need skilled laborers in Indiana, and we need trained employees and trainable employees, and we need to quit pointing our fingers at the school teachers and have them sit down at the table, because they're part of the solution. This war on public education and teachers I don't support. As governor, I'm going to work with Glenda Ritz, and we're going to have teachers sitting at the table. We're going to do away with that I-STEP test, but we are still going to have accountability. And the goal is going to be to take politics out of the schools. And then again, like you said when we started talking, it's being that person that takes the best ideas. And when you're dealing with the general public, there's 3 groups. There's Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. And you take those best ideas. It's about people. It's not about politics. It's about progress, not about ideology.
A couple things you reminded me of when you were talking about that. There was a professor from Purdue, whose name escapes me right now, who came into Clay County last winter and was talking about the prospects for agriculture in the state, and he basically pointed his finger and said, some of you folks aren't going to be in farming next year. What can we do? What can we do to turn that around?
Well, you know, ag's going through a lot of changes. We're seeing what's called value added. I mean, the simplest thing is, of course, taking corn, feeding it to a cow, and turning it into hamburger. But we're seeing value added products going on everywhere. Purdue's one of the nation's leaders at this. I'm so glad that it's here and in our state. I think that we're probably going to see some changing in farming, which is really directed more from the national level, but the state level. But what we can do in Indiana is do everything we can to hold the line on property taxes. But we need to focus on our small communities, whether it's Brazil, Linton, Clinton, Sullivan. We need to have economic development take place in these cities too. We need to be able to keep and attract and retain our young people that go off to Indiana State or Purdue. We need to have something for them to come back to if they would so like. My wife and I have 3 children. One's out of state, one's in Indianapolis, and only one's still in our home area. And anything we can do to help grow our economies in our smaller and mid-sized communities helps the ag community. Ag is business. Agriculture is business. Agriculture needs clean water. Agriculture needs infrastructure. It needs storm sewers. It needs the same things we do to grow our local economy. They need skilled labor. And those are the things that we work on. If we focus on the economy, everything else falls in place.
Well, let's talk about education just for a minute. I think many people have seen your commercial where you've talked about teaching to the test. And here in Clay County, the school corporation is actually actively working with local industry, Great Dane and other companies. And what they're doing is they are going out and looking at these companies and seeing what is going on and what kids need to know who aren't going to go to college to get into those factories to fulfill those jobs. Our local companies are having a terrible time right now trying to get and to keep employees, and the reason that they're giving is that there are so many generous state and federal helps available that the people say, I can't afford to work full-time for you because I will lose my federal babysitting allowances and so forth. What's your position on that?
I would have to say, first of all, if there's programs like that, of course, they're federal, but I'd want to know what that employer is paying, because sitting at home should not outpay more than what working should. And I know there's some situations like that when you're dealing with a $7.25 minimum wage. But jobs that pay a living wage, and that's what my focus is on high wage paying jobs. Those are out there, and that's why what your school corporations here in Clay County are doing, you're seeing in other areas. You've got great school corporations here, and what they're doing is essential. I've traveled the state for 6 years and never had one business person say anything about the tax structure. It's always about employees. Sometimes, but it's having skilled employees, but they've got to pay a decent living wage, of course, to attract those employees. There's a lot of employees who can't pass a drug screen and issues like that, which we can deal with. We can deal with too. But if they are paying a good living wage job, employees will be there. Sadly, over the last few years, they've taken away what we used to call vocational education. They now call it career path, learn and earn, or apprenticeship type programs. These are so needed. We could use 5,000 carpenters today in the state of Indiana. We could use we're going to create over 300,000 some type of skilled jobs in the next 5 years, and if we are not prepared for them, they're going to go somewhere else. Salesforce, one of the fastest growing companies in America that was in Indianapolis, they tell me that they could hire 200 people like that, entry-level computer courses, and they don't require a bachelor's. They don't require an associate. They'd like them to have 4 classes at Ivy Tech, Vincennes University, or Indiana State. They want them to have 4 entry-level computer classes, and then they'll train them, and they'll pay $40,000 a year with benefits. Those are what we need to be focusing. That's why when your school's talking with local businesses, we've got to get Indianapolis out of, and politics out of education. Your local school boards, your local school superintendents, your local businesses, they know what's needed in this community, and they're tailoring programs to meet those needs. And that's why we need to have the state pull back, get a little out of there, and let your local elected school board and businesses and your school superintendent and your teachers work on these curriculums.
Now, you mentioned a living wage. Would you like to quantify that? How much are you thinking about?
You can't put a dollar amount on it because it costs more to live in northwest Indiana, in Maryville, Hammond, Hobart, than it does in Sanborn. It costs more to live in Indianapolis than it does in Terre Haute. So you can't put a dollar amount on it. I do know you can't raise a family on $7, $8 an hour, and I'm not putting down those jobs. But I can tell you that a Gregg administration wants to focus on the quality of job, not on the quantity of jobs. When I see people bragging that, we've created hundreds of jobs that are paying $8 an hour, $9 an hour with benefits. You can't raise a family on it. No wonder people don't want to get up and go to work. And that's why we're going to focus on these high growth, high wage paying jobs. These other jobs we still want, but those are a great second income for somebody in the family, but you can't raise a family on that by itself.
Okay, very good. And I have one other question for you. I saw on the news at noon today, there are 3 people vying for Governor Pence's job. And I'm just wondering, of the likely Republican candidates, which one would you prefer to run against?
You know, the people say that there's been a lot of change happening in Indiana in the last month. 2 things haven't changed. I'm still John Gregg, and I'm still the one that wants to serve as governor. I'm not interested in being governor. I want to serve as governor, and there's a big difference. I don't have any say in that, but I can tell you none of those 3 started out wanting to run for governor. They're opportunists. They're coming to this, I don't know, as either a consolation prize or what, but it tells me that they're not focused on the job of being governor of the state of Indiana. Our current governor, I said the same thing all along, and it's obviously he wasn't either. It was a stepping stone. This job's much too important to just use as a stepping stone. This is a job where you want someone who's going to bring people together and have a vision for Indiana.
Anything you want to say we haven't covered?
Spent a lot of enjoyable time in Clay County, working in the coal industry for Peabody, mainly Amex coal, out at the Chinook mine and all around. Had many friends many years ago here, but I always enjoyed coming to Brazil, and I've always enjoyed being from here in the Wabash Valley, west central Indiana, and it's great to be here today.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.